Welcome back to another episode of Games Denominations Play. This one today comes from the subreddit of LCMS, posted by user PeccatoretJustice. As of recording this video, this post had 16 likes and 72 comments. It is primarily a text post, with the title reading, "The Concordia system has graduated 33 Lutheran teachers in the past year, a number that has been happening for many years now. Something is not working. My kid's school has to poach teachers from Baptist schools and non-denominational schools." The main body of the text post reads as follows: "Why don't we take a long look at our Concordia systems and see why they are not working? Why can't we find Lutheran teachers? Is it salary from the school? Is it the tuition prices? Or is it the content of the schools that they are learning from/going to? Another reason is that the teachers don't stay in the profession due to being mostly women who want to homeschool or be stay-at-home moms eventually. This was why we had to replace 4 of the 5 teachers in the last few years. Minor reasons include that parents were stressors and didn't set good boundaries with their children. Also, the schools and churches required a lot from them, extra work that was unpaid." As much as I appreciate OP bringing up a conversation about why there's not a lot of teachers that are being graduated, I think OP is missing out on a bunch of factors. First, yes, tuition prices are insane, and yes, the salary from the schools tends to be insanely low, but the cost of living keeps on getting higher and higher, and churches don't seem to understand that / are willing to compensate for that for the teacher they, quote, "so highly value," end quote. And by the way, I take that quote from a couple personal conversations I've overheard discussing things like budgets for schools and teachers. What OP stated here seemed to be a nice way of putting that in general, most congregations and pastors take advantage of their teachers, especially with additional unpaid work. Most teachers do have to put up with that, whether they're public school or parochial school. However, it is only in parochial school where you tend to be told as a called worker to take it because you serve Jesus, so therefore we need to make a martyr out of you. The next thing that I would question is OP's assertion that teachers generally don't stay due to them being mostly women, and assume that they all want to homeschool or be stay-at-home moms eventually. In general, if you're a woman teacher at a parochial school, your options are severely limited from the moment you step through the door. Sometimes you're called for exactly what you were trained to do, but sometimes you're called for something that is not specifically within what you were trained to do. For example, if you were training to deal with high school students, they'll push you to accept a call that's for middle school age students because they'll tell you, well, it's basically a similar age range, and this way you don't waste your gifts. So a lot of people, men, but especially women, get pushed into these calls, and then they go in and they try to make it work, and they realize that they were pushed into something that they were not ready to do, that they were not trained to do, and they have no support from leadership. They have no support from pastors or the head administrators of the schools. As for being pregnant and wanting a family, and this is irregardless if you plan on being a stay-at-home mom at some point, it is really hard to have a teacher on maternity leave. Most female teachers get really limited maternity leave as a result, and they are pressured to come back sooner than they would want to. And as for male teachers, God forbid if they try to take paternity leave. Again, you don't see these being brought up as valid concerns by OP. They just get shuffled into the general broad categorization of most teachers are female, therefore most of them want to be stay-at-home moms and or homeschool their kids. I don't know if OP is deliberately being vague or if he or she is just parroting what they've been told by church and school leaders. Because these same vague generalizations will be used by those same leaders, trying to ignore the real crux, or in this case, multiple cruxes of the issue. This issue is not black and white, as one commentator tries to make out, but we'll get there in a sec. As for the last paragraph, that minor reasons include that parents were stressors and didn't set good boundaries with their children. That's not a minor stressor. That is a stressor that builds up over time. And when you have administration that undercuts their teachers, that doesn't stand up for their teachers against abusive parents, and everything that I said about them previously, that what you would call minor stressor OP becomes a huge stressor and ultimately the reason, one of many, that a person will leave the teaching field. Extra work that is unpaid, same thing. Another stressor that just adds up over time to become a major stressor. Again, one of many stressors. I guess this is what happens when you see people who serve in these called worker positions as not really people and individuals with needs that need to be met, but instead as machines to be worked. Like I said before, there is a commentator who decided to post his 2 cents on the opinion post, and this is what he says as user MPS-1993. And his position is noted as LCMS seminarian. He writes, "Unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot to do to fix this. Of course, we can encourage our young men and women to go into teaching, and we can offer ways to support them, such as tuition coverage, but ultimately the teaching vocation is suffering in the same way as all church work is. We have a shortage of pastors, musicians, teachers, principals, and DCEs. The list goes on and on. I don't think it's anything specific that the Concordias are doing wrong. Instead, they're feeling what most of higher education is feeling, a shrinking interest in higher education because the cost is too great and the benefit too small. All we can do is remain faithful to God's word, continue encouraging and training our young men and women, and support them as best we can. The harvest is indeed plentiful, but the laborers are so few." Upset Cabinet 9559 responds with, "Spot on. This is not a new problem, and the church is trying to address it through the Set Apart to Serve campaign. However, like most things, it's a little too late. We're bailing out the boat without filling the holes first." I'll let you dwell on their sanctimonious responses while I'll read user Peccatoret Justice response, which is as follows. "I get frustrated by answers like this because it really is a, quote, none, quote, answer. Let's all just shrug our shoulders and move on. Quote, be encouraging, end quote. Why did you go into the seminary?" I agree with you, OP. This kind of response is very typical for leadership. It's attempting to seem like they're acknowledging that the problem exists, but then they make it out to be that the problem is the same thing as the rest of the world is experiencing, and that there's no right way to fix it except to remain faithful to God's word, except they use that And then immediately when you say, okay, but we can remain faithful to God's word, but maybe there are some real world factors at play, they immediately bring up, hey, you need to be at church more, you need to transfer your children over to one of our schools. They'll do everything they can to make it seem like you're part of the problem without really asking themselves the hard questions that are behind the decline of congregations and their schools. OP's question to the user about being a seminarian makes sense if you think about it. Why do pastors and teachers become pastors and teachers? It's definitely primarily out of a desire to serve, to give back. But if you're a pastor, regardless if you're in seminary or not, and you are looking forward to being on food welfare for pretty much the rest of your life, and anything that you might want to give to your kids will either be claimed by the congregation in the end or be sold to provide money for your own kids to go to school and be provided for, that is realistically going to put a damper on your desire to serve. Same thing with teachers. Saying empty platitudes like this person is doing is not going to actually address or fix any of the problems. Upset Cabinet 9559 comments in response to MPS's post, spot on. This is not a new problem, and the church is trying to address it through the Set Apart to Serve campaign. However, like most things, it's a little too late. We're bailing out the boat without filling the holes first. I would like to know what Upset Cabinet thinks that the holes in the boat would be. It's interesting that he doesn't try to address the topic of holes or what he thinks could be behind the issue of holes appearing in the bottom of the boat. However, just like with MPS's statement, he is just offering a whole bunch of vague vagaries without trying to address anything real. And unfortunately, this is all too common among any and all leadership, regardless of the denomination that they hail from. I feel for user Peccator Justice when he says, I get frustrated by answers like this, because it really comes down to the congregation, which is trying to inflate membership for the schools, and leadership, which seems to acknowledge, at the best of times, the problems for people entering ministry, and at the worst of times, are content by vaguely referring to it as an ever-occurring problem without actually trying to address root sources behind the problem itself. Now I want to address people who are actually trying to figure out possible solutions to the problems at hand. One of them is user Sailing in a Sunfish. She comments, one other reason that I haven't seen mentioned is that fewer and fewer LCMS school students are actually LCMS. Our parochial school populations are increasingly non-Lutheran. This isn't a bad thing. An LCMS education can be good for anyone, but it does mean that the usual pipeline leading towards teaching at an LCMS school is increasingly small. My own LCMS educational history, which is anecdotal but likely representative as well, When I was in elementary school in the 90s, the majority of my classmates attended LCMS churches. When I was in high school in the early 2000s, less than 50% of my classmates were LCMS members. We're seeing more non-denom students, as well as other denominations, and, this is in italics, unchurched families. Some of this is due to COVID. Some of this is due to politics. Some of this is due to the fact that LCMS schools are often good schools. Good is also in italics. I went to a Concordia and have an LTD. If I think about my friends who also received LTDs, I'd say about 5% are currently teaching at an LCMS school. Some of this is due to family situation, parentheses, staying at home with their kids for now, end parentheses. Some of it is burnout. A lot of it is salary, parentheses. One friend left her school after 10 years, 10 years is in italics, because of the rate of pay, end parentheses. I work in higher ed, parentheses, so I'm a part of the 95% too, end parentheses. I interact with Christian young adults every day, a tiny number of whom are going into teaching. This isn't an issue isolated to the LCMS. Public and private schools are facing similar shortages. College is ridiculously expensive across the board, public and private alike. Our young adults are being fed a narrative of what, quote, success, end quote, and, quote, sustainability, end quote, look like. And that narrative is not emphasizing teaching professions. The problems are legion. The same commentator replies to their own comment to continue saying, I wanted to do a little bit of follow-up digging to see what the current scholarships are at the university level, parentheses, so this does not include district/congregational support, end parentheses. Concordia, Chicago, church work scholarships between $6,000 and $11,000 a year. Total tuition/fees are $50,000. Edit, this is on top of a $5,000 to $15,000 merit scholarship, which I missed on my first reading. So total scholarship amount is between $11,000 and $26,000. Next up is Concordia, Irvine. Church work students are guaranteed 80% coverage of tuition. Current tuition/fees is $52,000. The scholarship would cover around $32,000. Concordia, Nebraska, minimum $27,500 scholarship a year for church work students starting fall 2023. This is a little over 50% of total tuition/fees of $49,500. Concordia, St. Paul, guarantees that tuition for church work students is no more than $6,000, parentheses, plus $11,000 for room and board, end parentheses. This seems to be the most affordable program at the moment, parentheses. The pre-sem program at CSP, short for Concordia St. Paul, is now tuition free, end parentheses. Side note, that's even better than most of the schools in Wells. So I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say Concordia St. Paul, you got your priorities straight so far. But I digress, and I will continue reading. Concordia, Texas, church work students can receive a $2,500 a year scholarship. Parentheses, there are also additional church work scholarships that are not guaranteed, end parentheses. Total tuition/fees are $55,000. Concordia, Wisconsin/Ann Arbor, undisclosed amount for church work scholarship, though pre-sem students receive $20,000 a year. There is also an up to $20,000 scholarship for LCMS members. Total tuition/fees are $42,000. The end paragraph reads, so long story short, most church work students are looking at a sticker price between $17,000 and $35,000 per year after initial church work scholarships are applied. Parentheses, this estimate doesn't include merit/athletic/other scholarships, end parentheses. Upset Cabinet 9559 responds with, thank you for this research. Honestly, getting a degree at the tech is still more affordable than the lowest price listed here on the subreddit. if everything is true and accurate here. And I've known at least one person who went and got her public school degree, taught for a bit, and then was, quote, hired, end quote, or called, if you prefer, to teach at a WELS parochial school. Meme-loving loser also posted a comment saying, I went to Ann Arbor and had friends in the LTD program. Biggest hurdle is cost. Getting you ed, short for education, degree will leave with upwards of $40,000 of student loans and a job that pays in the mid-30s to the low 40s for most people. Yeah, there are scholarships and theoretical support from the synod/districts/churches, but the base price for a year at a Conco pushes $40,000. The problem is not that Concos are offering programs outside of pre-sem and education. It's a church-wide problem with multiple fronts. Then begins the bullet point list as follows. First bullet point. In a lot of areas, there is too many LCMS K through 8s. Consolidating them and opening combined middle schools would make more sense financially and be better for the students. Congregations don't want to throw in the towel on the K through 8s they've been running for 100+ years. Second bullet point, selling high school kids on doing 4 to 5 years at a high-cost college for program with a CPE requirement and low pay is a hard sell. Third bullet point, there exists LCMS parents who are hesitant to push their kids to a Conco given that there is now thoughts of, quote, well, if a Conco isn't upholding the LCMS values I believe in, why Conco over a secular college, end quote. The theology faculties, synod, and districts need more doctrinal oversight authority. Fourth bullet point, there exist parents who went to LCMS schools who are hesitant to use an LCMS school for K through 12 because they remember them as run by an admin of hypocrites and full of hypocrite classmates. End paragraph reads as follows. I've always felt that one of the LCMS's strengths was its schools. Now that there are more and more non-Christians in the schools, they can double as missions full of people as they figure out who they are and what they stand for, which is a blessing and a responsibility. Also, the, quote, demographic cliff, unquote, has already swept its way through K through 12, and it is straining the system more. That brings up a really good point of scholarships. Scholarships are never available to everyone. There are usually prerequisites to get a scholarship, and a lot of people end up getting rejected for scholarships. I would personally be more interested to see a comparison of not just actual quotes for scholarships, but also the amount or percentage of students that receive the scholarships, and if they are the same students who receive those scholarships on a yearly basis. Remember, the middle class is slowly getting squeezed out, and their disposable income getting squeezed out along with them. So life is really becoming more expensive for everyone, which in that case, wouldn't it make more sense for the district to redirect more scholarship funds for students for those schools so that they could ensure there is a supply of teachers? Anyway, that's all I had for today. I could continue reading, but I just wanted to point out, make fun of the ridiculous comments being made here, but also point out some of the more sensible comments that will almost never get listened to in the discussion at hand. Please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.